This is Chuck Rapp with Multiply, a podcast to provide a word of encouragement for village church planters and leaders. As we move forward in the book of Nehemiah, in this episode we arrive at chapter 9, and I see similarities with our first episode from chapter 1. But before moving into lessons from the prayers of chapters 1 and 9, let's first briefly explore the timeline of events. Bible scholars tell us that the year 445 BC was a very busy year for Nehemiah. In March or April, he approached the king about journeying to Jerusalem. Most likely he arrived in Jerusalem in the month of August. The rebuilding of the wall was completed in October, and the events of chapter 9 occurred later that same month. Now, returning to chapter 1, Nehemiah prayed prayers of intercession for Jerusalem and its people. I pointed out the following in that episode. He wept and mourned for days about the situation. He was fasting and praying before God. He was praying on behalf of the sons of Israel. He confessed the sins of the sons of Israel against God. And he also confessed, "I and my father's house have sinned." Transitioning now to chapter 9, in my NIV Bible, the chapter heading is "The Israelites Confess Their Sins." Here are some of the verses I have underlined or marked in my Bible. Verses 5 and 6. "Blessed be your glorious name, and may it be exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are the Lord." They began their prayer acknowledging Jehovah for who he is. Verse 8. "You have kept your promise because you are righteous." They acknowledged Jehovah's character. Verses 9 through 15, they acknowledge the many works of God. In 16, "But they, our forefathers, became arrogant and stiff-necked, and they did not obey your commands." Similar to the first chapter, they confessed the sins of the sons of Israel. In verse 17 we read, "But you are a forgiving God, a gracious, compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love." Once again, they acknowledge and appeal to God's character. Then in verse 26, "But they were disobedient and rebelled against you. They put your law behind their back." There's more confession. Verse 29, "You warned them to return to your law, but they became arrogant and disobeyed your commands." Confession continues. Then in verse 33, "In all that has happened to us, you have been just. You have acted faithfully while we did wrong." Their repentance continues while again acknowledging God's character. Finally, I call our attention to verses 9:38 and 10:1. The first name of those who sealed this binding agreement between the people and God was, you may have guessed it, Nehemiah. Godly leaders lead people in prayers of heartfelt repentance. This has been a word of encouragement for village church planters and leaders.